I'm Omar Ford, Editor-in-Chief of MDDI, and welcome to this MDDI Fast Chat. Today, we are talking with Ryan Winter, Vice President, Engineering Services with Eastern Alloys Incorporated, International Zinc Association. Ryan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about zinc die casting today.
So, what is the International Zinc Association?
The International Zinc Association is a non-for-profit international organization that really helps the various zinc industries around the world. They try to develop sustainable markets through technology and through market development. And companies like ourselves, Eastern Alloys, we are members of the International Zinc Association. I've been working with them for about 20 years. And they offer programs such as this that allow us to promote our various industries, and in this case, zinc die casting.
Tell us a little bit about the zinc die casting industry.
I want to start with actually what the zinc industry is, and then we'll get to,
Sure.
I'd like to talk to you about zinc die casting. But the zinc industry, there's lots of different segments in zinc. The biggest segment is steel coating, or most people know this by the term galvanizing, which is where zinc protects steel. There's other types of zinc segments as well, like oxides and chemicals for fertilizers and for things like sun blocks and rubber. Zinc goes into rubber for various reasons, and batteries, and there's all sorts of different segments for zinc. I work mostly with the zinc die casting industry, which is about 15% of the market. The industry is fairly old. It's over 100 years old now, and however, the industry is not really. It doesn't seem old. It's a very high tech, automated process with all the bells and whistles that we really need in industry today to compete internationally. We have lots of different die castings go into a lot of different types of applications. The biggest segments in zinc die casting would be things like automotive, things like brackets, trim parts, very functional parts, things that go behind the things that you can't see in the car, really behind the scenes. Housing has a lot of components, things like appliances, hardware for windows and door hardware, things that you may not know that are zinc, but also other things like we have in clothing and toys and also all sorts of different types of segments. You most probably have touched zinc die castings in your day today.
Wow, that's very interesting. Oh, every manufacturing process has advantages, right? What are the advantages of using the zinc die casting process?
The die casting process alone is a very interesting process. It's really designed for high volume components, being able to cast a net shape component without having any machining or a secondary operation. So it's a really neat process, specifically for high volume components. There's several different types of alloys that can be die cast: aluminum and magnesium and copper and zinc. Those are sort of the main alloys. There are some major advantages with zinc that are very important that I don't think are very well understood through most of the industry. First of all, zinc is a very low energy intensive alloy. You can melt the zinc at a low temperature compared to aluminum and magnesium. So there's a lot of energy savings there. In addition, because of that low melting temperature, additionally, it has a low attack rate on steel. And so the tools that are used in the die casting process for zinc last about 10 times longer, or up to 10 times longer than aluminum or other alloys. But we also have fast cycle times, and it's a very fluid alloy, and so we can make some very complex shapes. If you have an assembly or a component that has multiple components in it, you can actually consolidate some of these assemblies into one net shaped component. So overall, it's a very cost-effective opportunity that designers and OEMs have to incorporate zinc in their design.
Now, those are the advantages, but I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about disadvantages regarding the zinc die casting process.
Yeah, there disadvantage is a word I don't like to use. I like to say challenge instead. But we do have challenges in our industry. One of the challenges we have is temperature. And I said earlier that zinc die castings have a low melting temperature, and that's a very, very good thing. But on high temperature applications, it can be a challenge. And so that is definitely one of the challenges that we see. And typically, the rule of thumb is if you have a component that's around 200 to 250 Fahrenheit, it's not a problem using a zinc component. But once you get above that range, there can be some challenges, and we need to really look at that. It depends on the amount of stress that the casting sees. But we do have some new alloys that have helped bridge the gap. One is called EZAC, the one that I've helped develop, and it helps us to get into some of those applications that we may not have ever been able to get into before. The other big one is weight. Zinc is about 2.5 times heavier than, say, aluminum die casting alloys, and so that has been a challenge. However, in some cases, weight is a very good thing. An example is the KitchenAid mixer. It's a type of a product that you really don't want hopping around your countertop as you're making your bread.
Exactly.
And so a lot of companies like that weight. Other things like the razor handle. The difference between a metal razor handle and a plastic one. There's a difference there. There's a haptics there that people like to feel the touch of metal heavier products. But we do understand that in applications like automotive applications and others, there is a lightweighting going on, and we recognize that. And one of the advantages of zinc is that we can actually, it's a very fluid alloy. And so we can actually cast things thinner and more complex. And so our opportunity with the challenge that we have is to redesign with zinc. And we can actually, if we design things correctly, we can actually compete in weight and in strength with a die casting aluminum component with just making some modifications in the design.
Now, you mentioned that zinc die castings are in the medical industry. Can you give maybe some specific examples?
There's lots of opportunities for medical. I'm familiar with several things like housings for an X-ray device, or like a component that goes in a stethoscope or a defibrillator, inhalers, monitoring devices. I'm aware of cart bases that were designed in zinc for a while. One in particular that I'm familiar with is an open shear device that doctors use when they're in surgery to both shear and cauterize at the same time. That was one we were looking at, if zinc will work in that application. And again, zinc can be either used without a coating or with a coating. There's lots of opportunities, lots of different types of coatings that we can use in case we need that corrosion resistance that zinc may not have with things like blood and other things like that.
Sure. Zinc die casting has been around for a long time. Are there any new recent developments in the technology?
There have been in both technology as in components as well as in alloy. I mentioned that EZAC alloy. That's a fairly new development that helps us get into certain applications for higher temperature, creep-related applications. But there's actually some new technology coming out. In our industry, when you make a casting, you have a runner system or a sprue, and that's basically just waste, and that can be recycled at the die casting process. But we've developed, a couple companies have developed some processes where we can eliminate that runner system and sprue to eliminate that waste. And that's a really neat technology. It helps us to become more efficient by loading up a die with more cavities, but also energy costs are lower because of that same thing. But also we're controlling the energy better, and we're eliminating that scrap. And so there's a lot of really economical and environmental opportunities that we have with that type of technology. We believe it's going to really catch on here soon.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I've been speaking with Ryan Winter, Vice President, Engineering Services with Eastern Alloys Incorporated, International Zinc Association. Thank you for joining us, Ryan, for this MDDI Fast Chat.
Thanks, Omar.